Welcome to Equip, Build, and Mature. Hope you're having a great day. As I like to do on Tuesdays, I want to share a word of encouragement with you. We're going to be looking in Luke chapter 10. A lawyer stood up to test Jesus. In Luke 10:25, it says, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Well, Jesus asked him what the law said. And this man answered correctly in verse 27 of Luke 10. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. And your neighbor as yourself. In 10:28, Jesus told him, do this and you will live. But this lawyer was not satisfied. He wanted a boundary. He wanted a legal limit. He wanted a line he could draw around the word neighbor so he would know exactly who he had to love and, more importantly, who he did not have to love. So he asked the question that triggered the most famous parable Jesus ever told. Verse 29 was his question. And who is my neighbor? A man traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho was attacked by robbers. He was beaten, he was stripped naked, and he was left half dead on the road. Both a priest and a Levite passed by. They saw this man who had been attacked, and they crossed to the other side. Then a Samaritan stopped, bandaged this wounded man's wounds, carried him to an inn, and paid for his care. So, first of all, we need to notice that the road is important. The road to Jerusalem, or the road from Jerusalem to Jericho, descends about 3,000 feet over about a 17-mile course through barren, rocky wilderness. Now, in the ancient world, it was a notoriously dangerous road that travelers dreaded to travel. There were always robberies and killings on it. And Jesus did not randomly pick this setting. Every person listening to his parable had walked that road or knew someone who was afraid of that road. Secondly, we need to notice the priest and the Levite. They walked past the dying man. Not necessarily because they were selfish or cold-hearted or cruel, but they walked past this man because they, in their minds, were being faithful to the law. Numbers chapter 19 verse 11 says that if you touch a dead body, you are ritually unclean for 7 days. And Leviticus chapter 21 explicitly prohibited priests from becoming unclean by contact with the dead. The text says the man was half dead. Neither the priest nor the Levite could be certain just looking at the man, but they didn't want the chance becoming ritually unclean. If the man lying on the road was already dead, touching him would have disqualified them from completing their temple duties. They could not serve or enter the sanctuary. They could not perform the rituals that their entire lives were built around. They did not necessarily walk past because of a lack of mercy. They walked past because their religious system made mercy and faithfulness feel like they were on opposite sides of the road. These two men, the priest and the Levite, they chose the institution over the person that was bleeding in front of them. Third, we need to notice the Samaritan. This story was a theological grenade that Jesus threw directly at the most religious people in the room. For centuries, Jews and Samaritans, they had hated each other. They worshipped at two different temples, one in Jerusalem, the other on Mount Gerizim. They saw each other as heretics. They never ate together. If they could avoid it, they never traveled through each other's territory. The hatred was ethnic, religious, and generational. When Jesus said the word Samaritan to a Jewish audience, he named their enemy. Every person listening would have expected that the Samaritan was going to be the villain of the story, the one who finished the man off or robbed what was left. Instead, Jesus made the enemy the hero. The Samaritan stopped. He bandaged the wounded man's cuts and sores and bruises. He poured oil on for healing, and he poured wine on as an antiseptic. He lifted the man onto his own donkey. That meant the Samaritan walked the remaining distance on foot through dangerous territory. He took the man to an inn, paid for his care from his own money, and he told the innkeeper in chapter 10, verse 35, "When I come back, I will reimburse you for whatever extra you spend." This enemy did what the religious leaders would not do. The outsider did what the insider's own law prevented them from doing. The man that their entire culture taught them to hate became the only one in the story who truly acted like God. Jesus did not answer the lawyer's original question. The lawyer had asked in verse 29, "Who is my neighbor?" He tried to find the boundary of obligation. He tried to draw the smallest possible circle around the word love so he could know who was not in his circle. Jesus did not draw a circle. Jesus reversed the question entirely. Verse 36, he asked, "Which of these three do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers?" Not who qualifies as your neighbor, but which one became a neighbor. The question was never about who deserves your mercy. It was about if you are the kind of person who gives mercy. Do not miss this detail. The lawyer's answer. He simply could not bring himself to say the word. He did not say the Samaritan. He said the one who showed mercy to him. Jesus dismantled the man's entire theological framework. He had proven that the enemy was much more righteous than the religious leaders. He showed that the law had become the obstacle to the love that the law was supposed to produce. After that, the lawyer could not say the name of the hero. The prejudice ran so much deeper than the parable could reach. This parable forced the most religious people in the room to admit that their enemy was more righteous than their religious leaders. The system they spent their entire lives defending was the very thing that prevented them from keeping the command at its very core. In John chapter 4, Jesus sat at a well and asked the Samaritan woman for a drink of water. She was so shocked. John chapter 4 verse 9, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" See, Jesus crossed the same ethnic, religious, and cultural line that he made the hero of his parable cross. 7 to 10 years after the resurrection of Jesus, Peter had not yet fully learned this lesson. In Acts chapter 10, God sent Peter a vision of unclean animals and told him, "What God has made clean, do not call impure." Then Peter went to a Gentile's house and immersed them. He broke down the same bias that Jesus tore down in the parable. The bias instinct. The bias instinct runs so deep that Peter needed that lesson repeated. Today I want to encourage you. Do not surrender to the instinct of bias that draws lines around who qualifies for mercy. I want to encourage you today, make certain that you show mercy as God has shown you mercy. Guys, thanks for coming by. Hope you have a great day, and may God continue to strengthen us to be the type of people He calls us to be. Take care.